Welcome to part 2. In part 1 of this series, we worked alongside our friend Dave Tucker as he started forming the shape of the custom fuel tank for Nick Sharp's Moto Guzzi Cafe Racer. Today in part 2 of this series, we'll begin the metal finishing process and get the tank welded together. This footage of Dave was filmed by our friend Kathy on a phone and was sent to us to edit together. Let's get started.
Last time we saw this, it was roughly the right shape, but it was all a bit sort of here and there, and it was held together with sticky tape, which isn't really quite the ticket. So time to get it all looking a bit prettier. And the start of that is doing some metal finishing. You can see what I've done here. I've actually coated this panel, or at least part of it, in a sort of blue dye. I use some stuff called die-chem layout fluid, but many others are available. And then I just very lightly sand it using, well, in this case, a little detail sander. Any kind of sort of small orbital sander would do. And that just takes the dye off the high points and leaves it in the low points, therefore making it very clear, where your imperfections are. I mean, obviously here it's all quite nice and smooth, but you've got low points here and along the edges. Just to give you a quick idea, I'm just going to very quickly run the sander. Just take this sort of section out, and you can see how the sander takes the dye off the surface. Right, there we go. As you can see, that's revealed a few more imperfections. The one thing I would say, I wasn't actually giving that a huge amount of pressure then, because you're not actually trying to sand the imperfections out here and now. You're literally just trying to reveal them for sort of further work. You've sort of got two different types of problem to deal with. Here, you've got sort of fairly smooth but depressions, but over quite a large area. On a panel like this, that's best dealt with the English wheel. These little areas here are far smaller in area, but they're just running fingers over. You can feel they're quite deep. They're sort of quite pitted in. So we'll be tackling those a little bit later on with the hammer and dolly. We'll just have a first go at getting that low area out that we were looking at earlier. Now, again, as I said, using the English wheel, not too much pressure because we don't want to really change the shape of the panel overall too much. Just want to sort of ease that area up just a fraction. So we're just working over that area which has got the blue marking die left, and I mean, you actually feel as it goes through the wheel that it is a slight low patch. You can feel it, the wheel sort of clunking through it. So yeah, just to and fro. There we go, and maybe just a slight angle across it. Just try and tease it up. Don't want to go mad. Just sort of feel it, check it. Maybe a little more pressure. Again, you really want to sort of work up to it. Right, well, there we go. That's feeling a little more promising. So the sort of the test is to go and have another go with the sander and see if it takes a bit more of the marking dye off. We haven't completely removed the problem, but as you can see, there is a little less dye there. I've re-sanded it, and it has taken off some more dye, so we're going the right way. In this instance, we go back to the English wheel, do a bit more, sand it again until that comes out nice and sort of plain, sort of silvery, clean aluminium, and then we know we've got a reasonably smooth surface. Going to have a quick go at sorting out these pits here. First thing, just give them very quick skim over with a body file to a fairly rough file, to just see how much we can take out that way. But I think given the depth of them, we will have to do some hammer and dolly work as well. Yeah, I think that tells us all we need to know. I think time to get stuck in with the hammer and dolly and see if we can take a bit more of that out, because that's not going to come out with the file. Right, that's starting to feel a little bit smoother when I just run my finger over it, so we'll just give it a very gentle run with the file and see what we've got. And yeah, we can see it's just starting to take that first little patch of blue dye out. Obviously more work to do, and we've got all its little friends around here to deal with, but that's the sort of basic principle. And then once we've got it nice and smooth, we go over it again with the sander just to make sure. But that is essentially the first principles of some metal finishing to get the panels sort of presentable prior to being welded together. Well, now we've got the tank panels smoothed out, time to sort of assemble it a bit more properly than just with the old sticky tape. So what we're going to use, and what we have used, as you can see here, are some wonderful little things called clecos, sometimes known as skin pins, and I'm sure there are various other names as well. Right, the way I tend to employ these is just using little offcuts of scrap aluminium as sort of brackets, and then literally just pop a couple of holes into the two adjacent skins to match, and then match up with the bracket. You can see how that sits over there, and then stick the pins in using the specially designed pliers, which are again readily available. They just pop in and then release under spring pressure, and there you go. That is a nice solid joint between the two skins, ready to take a nice neat either a TIG or a gas weld, whatever your personal preference, and you can gradually work around and assemble the tank that way. Right, so far we've pretty much exclusively been looking at the top shell of the tank, the nice beautiful curvy bit which makes everyone go ooh. This is what lies beneath the tunnel, base plate and the baffle plates, which at least attempt to control the slosh of the fuel forward and back. Some people have asked what alloys are used in these tanks. Basically the top shell parts that you've already seen, those are made in 1050, what is called commercially pure, because it's very amenable to being shaped and moved around, and yeah, it's quite adequate for that job. This, say, is a stronger alloy. It's called 5251, so it is from the 5000 series. It is not so amenable to being moved around, but it is quite good for making the more structural parts of the tank. Something somebody else brought up was what happens with work hardening, and that is a big issue with the 5000 series. You can see we do have to put a little bit of shape into the tail section here. Generally avoid shaping 5000 series if I can, but sometimes it does have to be done, and that becomes it requires a little thing called annealing, which is going to take us into an off-piste moment. To give you a very quick demonstration of the differences between the alloys and then a little overview of the annealing process, I've prepared some test pieces, things like that. They're all 2mm thick, exactly as per the metal in the tank. We'll start off with the 1050, which is the top shell metal. Now, I'm having to make some effort, but I can bend that by hand. Moving along to the 5251, exactly the same size, and I can sort of move it, but I'm straining. I really can't do a lot with that by hand. So that is a visual indication of the differences between them. To fend off comments, this isn't true annealing, as that is a very precise engineering procedure. This is kind of sort of the down and dirty workshop equivalent, but it works perfectly well for what we're going to want. It just softens the metal, makes it more malleable, makes it more workable. What we do, we take a perfectly normal piece of household soap, bar of soap, and just wipe it all over the aluminium. Coat the aluminium, then heat the aluminium until the soap starts to turn a browny black colour, because as it so happens, household soap changes colour at just the right temperature that aluminium anneals. Let's put the aluminium into the flame there, and just gently keep moving it around, and well, fairly quickly you can see the soap is starting to change colour, and that's annealing quite nicely there. That's working quite well. So that little piece is probably quite nicely done actually, so we'll turn that off. The place now smells of burnt soap, which is delightful, but that's just part of the game. Obviously I can't use the bit with just annealed because it's roasting hot, but this is a bit we prepared earlier, another bit of 5251, and this is annealed, and that is far easier to move. So you can see the basic effect of the process. Right, you've all been very good and sat through your educational session about the annealing. So your reward will be a little look at some of the shiny bits which go into the tank, the machined parts and such. These are the machined parts that will go into the fuel tank. As you can see, we have a very lovely aero style fuel filler cap, and because that one isn't vented, we've also got a little separate breather there. Both those parts are bought in from outside suppliers. The other stuff we have here, namely the rear mounts, the fuel tap mounting bosses, and these little shackle parts, they're all made in-house at DTR. There was one part missing from the little collection we just showed you, and that is the boss to mount the breather. Now, the reason it's missing is because it doesn't exist yet. And the reason it doesn't exist yet is because we've got a bit of a trick idea coming as to what we're going to do. Something quite nice and custom. In the meantime, staying with the subject of breathers momentarily, they are quite important, and they're something to be aware of if you do get into building tanks or setting up tanks or whatever. The majority of fuel systems do need some kind of vent, and that's what these jobbers are all about. In some cases, the vent is built into the cap. In some cases, the cap can be modified to accept a vent if necessary, but these aero caps, generally speaking, do not have vents, so you tend to end up using a separate breather. Whatever approach you end up taking, just be aware that they are, generally speaking, required, because if you don't have sufficient venting, your fuel supply can dry up and you come to an undignified halt, which can really be rather embarrassing, frankly. Okay, after a bit of a delay, while we got engrossed in the designing and making of fancy bits, we're now ready to have the beast welded together. We'll be using the TIG welding process, electric welding. So, without further ado, let's get on with it. You can see here, this is pretty much where it starts, with the various panels still held together with the skin pins. You can just see on this one that the first few tack welds have started to go in. At this point, as the tack welds start to be added, the skin pins are still doing a good job of holding everything in place, but you do just have to sort of pry and lever and adjust things just that little bit, just to make sure we get perfect or as near perfect alignment of the panels as we can. Should at this moment just mention that the gentleman you see here is our friend Neil Howe, who very much takes the lead on welding matters when it comes to these tanks. There he is, actually underway, put a tack weld going in. Then there's the result, a nice neat tack weld, just holding the two panels in place for now, and obviously as we work around the tank, to be joined by a great many more. Quite often what we do, certainly when building up the bigger, more complex tanks, is to build them as a series of sub-assemblies. Here we see the two side assemblies of the Guzzi tank. There will be another assembly which is the base plate and the tunnel and the baffles, etc. Obviously you've still also got the top panel, but that remains largely independent until it's finally put in place. Then it all comes together to give us this. This is a fully tack welded tank assembly, and that is ready now to be handed over to Neil, and he will probably add some more tacks to hold it more securely, but then get into the serious business of putting the seam welds in and making it a full sealed unit, which is where we end up here. Essentially a complete functional tank. Obviously still needs cleaning up, but you can see all the welds are there and solid. Slightly closer view there, and you can just also see the little sort of kind of spot weld things there. They're just sealing up the holes where the skin pins went through. Just got some more views here, looking up underneath the fuel tap boss. You see where that's been welded in, and then finally the view up from underneath the tank, showing the tunnel and so on. So that's kind of the end of that process, and that gives us the assembled item.